Hey, are you doing okay? Because we're about to tell you something that has had us not okay since this morning. There was one small moment that happened before BTS's concert in Goyang. A moment that maybe lasted only a few seconds, made up of just two simple words. And yet thousands of ARMY broke down in tears the second they heard it. And the most heart-melting part? Those words weren't from a song. Not from a long, rehearsed speech. Not from a carefully written letter. It was just two words. Spontaneous. Genuine. And they came from Park Jimin. Welcome to our channel. Whether you're a die-hard ARMY or just someone who has a heart, this is a video you need to watch all the way through. Because this story isn't just about an idol and his fans. It's about something far deeper than that. Okay, before we get to that one moment that broke the internet, we need to talk about context first. Because without context, you won't fully understand just how much weight those two words carried. Picture this. The year is 2026. After nearly 2 full years of BTS being away from ARMY due to mandatory military service, something they couldn't avoid as South Korean citizens, the moment the entire fandom had been waiting for finally arrived. BTS was back, complete, all 7 members, one stage. Their first post-military concert was scheduled for April 9th, 2026, in Goyang, South Korea. And this was no ordinary concert, friends. This was the opening chapter of a global tour that would take BTS to 34 countries across the entire world. 34 countries, meaning millions of ARMY from every continent, every culture, every language, all waiting for their turn. Goyang was the lucky city chosen to witness this grand reunion. And you can only imagine how the ARMY who had already arrived in Goyang must have felt. They had come from far away, from cities all across Korea, and many had flown in from abroad. They had spent months saving money, making plans, preparing their light sticks and outfits, and more than a few had cried alone in their rooms just holding their concert ticket, barely believing the day had finally come. But then, the rain came. Not a light drizzle, not the kind of rain you can just ignore, but a heavy downpour that drenched Seoul and the surrounding areas, including Goyang, right in the lead up to the concert. The ARMY who had already lined up outside the venue, who had willingly stood for hours just to get the best spot, the best view, the very first energy from their idols. They had to stand in the rain. But did they leave? Did they step back? Of course not, because they are ARMY. And that is exactly where our story begins. In the middle of all the concert preparations, while everyone backstage was busy with sound checks, wardrobe fittings, last-minute choreography run-throughs, one fan standing outside the venue was doing something quietly beautiful. In the pouring rain, lightstick in hand and a smile on her face, one ARMY was recording herself dancing in the rain while listening to Idol, one of BTS's most iconic tracks. Soaked? Absolutely. Freezing? Without a doubt. Happy? Beyond words. That video got uploaded to social media, and somehow, it found its way to the eyes of someone completely unexpected. Park Jimin. And what did Jimin do? He left a comment. Just 2 words. It's going to be cold. Jimin, April 2026. 2 words. Not a poem. Not a long paragraph. Not a speech crafted to make people cry. But ARMY all around the world fell apart the moment they read it. Why? Because in those 2 words, Jimin wasn't talking about himself. He didn't say, "Thank you for coming." He didn't say, "You all are incredible." He didn't even mention how moved he was to see fans being so devoted. He just worried. About the temperature. About the physical comfort of the ARMY standing out there. It's going to be cold. Not a compliment. Not a formal expression of gratitude. But that's exactly what made it so much more powerful than all of that. It was the purest form of care. The kind that comes from someone who sees a person they love in an uncomfortable situation and whose very first reaction isn't, "Wow, you guys are amazing," but rather, "I'm worried you're going to be cold." The fan who made the video replied to Jimin's comment with just as much warmth. "Appa, you're going to be cold on stage too. It's okay." And those words drifted through the minds of millions of ARMY. This short, simple exchange between an idol and his fan, in the rain, before the biggest concert of their lives. You know what the most remarkable part of this moment is? Jimin did not have to notice that video. He was under enormous pressure. This was the first post-military concert, the one millions of people had been anticipating, the one marking a new era for BTS. There were a million things demanding his attention, but he made the time. He saw a fan dancing in the rain, and he felt the cold she must have been feeling. But hold on. If you think this was the first time Jimin showed this kind of concern for ARMY, you might be forgetting a story that matters just as much. Let's go back to 2019 to 2020. BTS was holding a concert, and as has happened more than once along their extraordinary journey, the rain arrived without warning. The concert went on in the downpour. The stage was wet and slippery. The members had to be careful not to fall, had to protect their microphones from the water, had to keep performing with full energy even as conditions made everything harder. But what was Jimin most worried about? Not the slippery stage, not his soaked costume, not the choreography becoming more dangerous in the wet. With complete sincerity, Jimin said to his fellow members and to the press, "I'm not worried about anything except the fans feeling cold. There's strong airflow up on stage. It's cold for us, so I kept thinking, it must be so much colder for the people sitting out there. Just sit with that for a moment. On stage, there are warmers. There are blazing spotlights. There's intense physical movement that keeps the body warm." And yet Jimin's mind went to, if we're already cold up here, how cold must they be, sitting still, in the rain, for hours? His group mate, Kim Taehyung, expressed something similar. He said he personally loves being in the rain, but he was worried ARMY would catch colds from sitting in it for so long. Two people, two separate statements. One shared feeling, ARMY comes first. And the fact that the 2026 moment in Goyang felt like an echo of that feeling Jimin had shown years before, that's not coincidence. That is character. That is who Park Jimin actually is. Some people say that idols only pretend to care, that it's all a management strategy, an image carefully crafted by a PR team. And honestly, for some artists in this industry, that might be true. But Jimin is an anomaly, because his care doesn't show up at planned press conferences. It doesn't appear in rehearsed speeches. It surfaces in a spontaneous comment on social media, in a backstage moment after a rain-soaked concert, in the middle of the pressure of preparing for the biggest show of his life. The care that shows up when no one is watching is the most real care of all. The moment Jimin's words spread, social media exploded. Twitter, Weverse, Instagram, TikTok, every platform was flooded with reactions from ARMY all over the world. And what was fascinating wasn't just how many people reacted, it was how they reacted. Someone wrote, "I just read Jimin's comment, and now I'm crying in the office bathroom. My boss doesn't need to know." Someone wrote, "Two words from Jimin hit harder than any romance novel I've ever read." Someone wrote, "He didn't have to care. He could have just said nothing." But he didn't. And that's all I need to know about him as a human being. And then there were the ones who went even deeper. ARMY who dug back up the 2019 to 2020 rainy concert story and posted it side by side, saying, "This isn't new. Jimin has always been like this. For years." The most moving responses came from the ARMY who had actually been there in Goyang, who had stood in the rain, who had danced while soaking wet, who had felt raindrops on their faces while holding purple light sticks with every ounce of love they had. One of them wrote, "I had been standing out there for 3 hours in the rain. I was completely drenched. I was freezing. But when I read Jimin's comment, I couldn't feel the cold anymore. I just felt warm inside." And maybe that's the most beautiful part of this whole story. The rain didn't stop. The temperature didn't rise. But 2 words, 1 sentence, was enough to transform a physically miserable experience into a memory that will last a lifetime. ARMY is known as one of the most loyal, most passionate, most creative fan bases in the world. But behind all of that, they are also ordinary human beings who, like everyone, simply want to feel seen, to feel that their presence matters, that their sacrifices, the time, the money, the energy, the tears, are not wasted. And with those 2 words, Jimin said, "I see you. I care." That is why ARMY cried. Now, let us step outside the K-pop frame for just a moment, because this story is actually far more universal than just a tale of an idol and his fans. We live in a world where attention is rare, where everyone is consumed by their own life, where even the people closest to us sometimes forget to simply ask, "Are you okay?" And Jimin, in the middle of a packed schedule, the pressure of the concert, the eyes of the world upon him, the weight of being part of the biggest group on the planet, he took a moment to think about one person, one fan, dancing in the rain. It's going to be cold. Those words weren't just for that one fan. In some way, They felt like words meant for every single army wherever they are. Those who have been standing in the rain of their own lives, who have waited a long time, who have been patient, who have given everything they had. I know you're cold. I see you. That's something we all need sometimes from the people we love. Not grand praise, not an expensive gift, not a dramatic gesture. Just someone who pays attention and says with complete sincerity, "I'm worried about you." And perhaps that is exactly why BTS, and Jimin in particular, has been able to build such a deep connection with so many people all over the world. Not only because of the music, not only because of how they look, not only because of their breathtaking performances, but because they feel real. They feel like people who genuinely care. In an entertainment industry that so often feels artificial, there is something profoundly refreshing about sincerity like this. And then, the concert began. Thousands of ARMY who had been soaking wet outside finally made their way in. Purple light sticks, the ARMY bomb, lit up together like an ocean of stars. BTS walked out onto the stage as a complete unit. 7 people, 1 team, 1 family. And when the very first song started playing, the rain outside no longer felt relevant. Because inside that arena, there was only one thing that felt real. BTS was there. ARMY was there. And they were together again. The members, RM, Jin, Suga, Jhope, Jimin, V, Jungkook, performed with a joy they couldn't hold back. This wasn't just a concert. This was a reunion. This was a celebration. This was proof that distance, even the distance created by 2 years of mandatory military service, cannot break a bond built over more than a decade. And in the middle of all that magnificence, the ARMY who had been standing in the rain no longer felt cold. They were too busy crying for a completely different reason, because it was all too beautiful to hold inside. So, friends, that's the story. 2 words. It's going to be cold. From Park Jimin, before BTS's historic concert in Goyang, April 2026. 2 words that prove genuine care doesn't need many words. Doesn't need a big stage. Doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs a heart that truly sees another person. And if today you're feeling unseen, if you're standing in the rain of your own life and no one seems to notice, remember that somewhere out there, someone once said to thousands of people, "I'm worried you're cold." And maybe that's enough to remind us, we are not alone. Just as BTS has always told their ARMY, you are not alone. If this video touched your heart, please hit like and share it with your fellow ARMY. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest BTS content. And drop a comment below. What's the most emotional moment you've ever experienced as an ARMY? We want to hear your story. See you in the next one. Purple Heart.